Good morning, everyone, or good evening over there in LA for Ali. Maligayang ano? What is it? What is morning again? Magandang umaga.
Umaga.
Oh my gosh, I totally lost track. We're joining Tagalog class tomorrow, so we'll get a bit better with the greetings in Tagalog. But thanks for joining us on an early morning over here in Melbourne, and also the start of a long weekend in Melbourne. We're the Entrepreneurs, and we're a Filipino food and culture advocacy group who volunteer our time in business, design, storytelling, community building, and hospitality to promote Filipino cuisine, culture, and communities. And the purpose of Coffee in CHIKAHAN, or in Los Angeles, it could be cocktails in CHIKAHAN, is about building community through conversation, to connect, engage, and to uplift at a time when there's so much going on in this world. So it's real talk with real people as we navigate a life together, interrupted by this pandemic and with a lot of the world issues. So our aim is to run weekly sessions with special guests in business and the creation of food experiences, communities, and storytelling, to enable our barrio to be a part of the conversations and to be uplifted themselves as well. And today we have the pleasure on the 7th episode of Coffee in CHIKAHAN to welcome Miss Alexandra Cuerdo as well as Ranima Montes.
Yay!
Thanks for joining us. We're so excited.
Thank you for having us.
Oh my gosh, the power of technology. We're doing it across time zones. So thanks so much for the generosity of your time and space as well. So go ahead, Miss Ange.
Hi, so we're going to start off today with a bit of a Filipino icebreaker, which is a bit of an idea from our entrepreneur sis, Nina. What is a Filipino food that you grew up not liking so much, but now you love it? And for me, it's ampalaya or bitter melon.
I think for me, it's, you know, young mango with bagoong.
Oh, yeah.
Which is so good right now. I'm ready for it.
Yummy. Yeah.
But I remember like not understanding when I was 5, like, why are we eating unripe mango? And why are we eating it with small shrimp paste? Like, you know, like what's going on here?
Yeah.
And now I love it.
I mean, on paper, it doesn't sound like the most, you know, logical thing, but yeah. And yourself, Ranima?
I would say the same as Ali, and then I would also say balut.
Oh, nice! Wow. And do you get it often over here in Melbourne and stuff now? Still?
No, I actually don't know where to. I mean, I do know where to get it. I just haven't been able to get that far because I live in the But I prefer the younger ones as opposed to the really older ones.
Oh yes, for sure.
Intense.
Yeah,
when there's
a
feathers
little less
getting
crunchy.
Yeah.
And when there's feathers getting stuck in between your teeth, it's not as
It's gnarly,
and that's,
but
yeah.
How about you
I
guys?
get the appeal. I get it now.
Oh,
I didn't get it when I was a kid, but I get it.
Yeah, such an umami bomb, that's for sure, with the soup, like the little duck. Okay. I'm probably the same as Miss Ali. Like, I didn't really get the whole like pairing of sour and savory through the bagoong and the green mangoes, but I love it so much now that like I love to bake, and I've actually used it in one of my sort of sweet sort of applications. I've done like a tarte tatin where I replace the green mangoes with the green apples with the green mangoes, and rather than using salted caramel, I'll use the bagoong as being my salty element to it and stuff.
that sounds
really
amazing.
yummy.
Yeah. So
every time I eat it, I inhale it. It's so good.
Can you send
definitely.
some?
I'm sorry, say that again.
I said, can you send some all the way to Los Angeles?
I know. Well, I still have hope that we'll one day be sitting at the same table in the same city sometime. So
Yes, please.
Still, even though there's lots going on in this world. So without, you know, like, I guess that's a good segue into, you know, with everything that is going on, you know, this series came about as really a way to stay connected during a time of COVID. But there's so much more broader and more painful sort of like events right now happening in the world. How are you guys keeping your mental sort of health as well as your well-being well? You want to start, Ranima?
I would say giving yourself permission to not do anything is really big for me. I think it's so ingrained in us to keep being productive, and like productive is like a really, really big word. Be it like what you're working on next, or what you're doing next, or what you're planning next, or whatever it may be. I think for me, looking after myself in this moment is allowing myself to acknowledge that I am okay with doing nothing right in this moment. Be it like for a small amount of time, just so that you can give yourself that break that you need in order to then be okay to do stuff later. Otherwise, I feel like it builds up and you reach a point where you just completely burn out, I think.
Yeah. And what were you doing before COVID hit? Like, I guess just as an intro to yourself and what your pre-COVID life was like, and you know what you were getting up to as well.
I was working. Yeah, and I had a job, so I recently just lost that job due to like big cuts in the media and everything. But I worked, I hung out with all my friends, I was working on different projects. I like, it felt like there was a lot more happening, I guess, before pre-COVID. But then I'm also fine with where we are as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Ranima. And then how about you, Ali, over there in the west coast of the States, originally in New York, but then obviously back in the west coast where your family's at. How are you keeping well?
Oh man, a lot of cooking, and a lot of cooking. I mean, it's interesting. I feel like everyone I know has become a home chef. Even if you didn't cook before, in the before time, now you're a cook. And I think everyone is becoming really intimately acquainted with themselves through food and through memories and like what's comforting to you. Like making simple homemade food that reminds me of my mom, reminds me of my Lola. I mean, these are things that I think are the things I look forward to. So in the midst of all of this uncertainty, there are still memories that are certain. There are still dishes that are certain. I can still make a killer chicken adobo. You know, I can sort of have that comfort food. And for me, that's definitely been a way to stay sane throughout this time.
Oh, definitely. And definitely, I think we can all attest to the fact that cooking has been our saving grace.
Yeah.
It ends up being like, you know, I guess like pause button, or sort of, you know, something in time that actually tells us the monotony of the day is broken up by the meals that we have with our family. They were the family that we were stuck with, right? Like we couldn't actually engage with others beyond our immediate. So it definitely was that special time to actually reconnect and to pause and to reflect on what the day's events were. Because oftentimes, yeah, it just feels way too much to handle.
I think it's a good time too to disconnect when you are cooking. You know, you can't be on your phone like scrolling through, you know, news and stuff like that. You have to really be present and mindful about like what's happening. So yeah, that's, to me, like cooking is also that.
I agree totally, and I think it's also really creative. You know, it's like this small creative act, and that's what I love about cooking, is that it sort of keeps me in touch with the ability to make something out of basically nothing, and I love that.
Yeah, that's right. That's amazing.
But I mean, you know, I'm the food person, having done ulam. I feel like I'm stereotypical that way, but I am the food person for any of you out there who don't know me. I'm Ali. I directed Ulam Main Dish, which is a Filipino food documentary here in the States that got picked up by Hulu.
Yes, oh my God, that's amazing.
In our quarantine.
Wow, right?
Yeah, and Australia.
I know, we were
which we
so
didn't
thrilled.
sure. Yeah, so it's pretty neat because a lot of new people have actually discovered the movie during quarantine, and we've been getting a lot of great messages on the Ulam Instagram. People saying like, "Oh man, I saw the movie, and now I want to order takeout from my local Filipino restaurant," or "Wow, you're reminding me of that comfort food that I love so much. So I'm gonna make whatever. I'm gonna make pancit tonight." And that really warms my heart.
That's amazing. And just a reminder for folks that are looking for something to watch, the link to Ulam is still available on our Entrepreneurs website, so check it out, as well as our IG bio link as well. So it's an amazing documentary. It was really one that inspired us to come together as a collective of women really wanting to champion our cuisine in a city that we love, and a city that still is very highly underrepresented when it comes to celebrating our Filipino cuisine, culture, and communities. So it definitely was a catalyst, and we thank you, Ali, for putting in that time and effort to create that beautiful documentary. So,
Thank you.
And it also gave us a bit of a like convergence point for a lot of storytellers, and to kind of tap into the local scene that we hadn't really connected with before Ranima. Like I think that's the way that we kind of all came together. If you wanted to kind of speak on your connection to storytelling and Filipino-ness.
Sure. For those that don't know, I'm Ranima Montes, and I am an arm-based filmmaker. My film Mestiza showcased just before Ulam did, during the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival, correct? Yes. And to this day, I still think that was like my favorite audience that has ever seen the film.
Oh, wow.
And I got incredibly emotional during it, because the reactions that you hear, like from the people behind you or the people in front of you, were just like straight to the heart, because it was people around me from all the same culture, with the same lived experiences, and understanding like every little small moment in that in Mestiza really, really made it worthwhile, or made it like, cool, this is why I made this film.
I love it.
Yeah. It was an awesome film. Just saying to everyone.
No. And how can we sort of be able to watch that short film again during this time, Ranima? What's the best way for the audience to?
Mestiza is about to be part of a online sort of like mini kind of viewing festival during quarantine, essentially, with Dog Milk, which is a local Melbourne film group. And I think they'll be the person that's curating it for the 2 weeks. Their name is Danica Hovart, and they'll be sharing it on their Instagram, which is Dog Milk, I'm pretty sure, at Dog Milk.
Oh, fabulous.
But I'll double check.
We'll definitely keep an eye on that and make sure folks know how to view that, because it was a beautiful short film, many moments that will resonate with each and every one of us as well. So, go ahead, Miss Sanj.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I think it really speaks to an experience that's not talked about so often, of being in between, of being kind of, in the middle of two different cultures and two different worlds. So, I'd love for both of you to get into that a bit during this chat. I mean, we've got like a heap of questions to go through, but yeah, something that I think both of you could probably speak to is that feeling. Well, sorry, continue, guys.
Oh no, that was a segue into that next question. Yeah, like a short film about Mestiza. What has that experience been like for you, navigating, in your own space?
I think so. I grew up in Oman, first off, in the Middle East, just near Dubai.
Okay.
And I wasn't taught Tagalog, and for reasons that you would have better opportunities if you didn't speak Tagalog. And I think, especially during like a lot of like my childhood, there was a lot of shame around being half Filipino or being the most Filipino looking. And I think I got really assimilated in the white side of me and was like, no, I'm Australian. I'm Australian. Or I was so adamant on hiding my Filipino self. And once I moved to Australia in around like 2007, I realized I was not welcomed as an Australian due to the way that I looked and the way that I spoke and just like all those things. And it was all the white Australians, I should mention, that deemed me not Australian enough. I wasn't born in Australia. I hadn't lived here before. I don't speak like Australians and like all of that. And so it put me in a very weird space where I was like, I've shunned this big part of my life or like half of my life for so long. And now I've come to live in the other half of my life, or like live as that identity. And I felt very like I hated Australia. It was like the complete 180. I hated this. I did not want to be in Australia. I wanted to go back where anywhere that I could just be who I said I was. Like, I think that was the hardest thing was I would be like, yeah, I'm Australian and Filipino, you know, I am both, or I am one or the other or whatever. Yeah, it was a rough time, but through like a lot of unlearning and learning, I am like, or I try to be as proud of both, but with like acknowledgement of like at the end of the day, as Australians, we are still like settlers on like Indigenous or First Nations lands, and it's a very strange feeling. I don't know, it's a complicated one to navigate, especially when going back to the Philippines, and not being able to speak Tagalog fluently, as there's lots of layers of why I understand why like I understand the complications, but like logically, but emotionally it's still like so much that you have to kind of work through.
Absolutely. And as far as like navigating you know, complexity and identity and like trying to find community, Ali, I just wanted to know how that resonates with you in your experience.
Oh man, I feel that so much. I really do. I mean, colonization is real. Like, I think that's something I learned late, you know, again, something I was never taught in school. I was never taught my history. I was never taught my Filipino history. I had to learn that on my own. And I had to learn it through my family. And that's something that I think a lot of Filipinas in diaspora share and have in common, is this sort of later rediscovering of your own history, your own Filipino-ness. And for me, that started as an adult once I had graduated college, after having been born and raised in the United States, in an extremely conservative part of California called Orange County. And at the time I was, what I like to call a baby queer. So I didn't know. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how my views and my perspective fit in with this very Caucasian, very conservative place that I grew up. Brown face at the time in a very white place. And so that took a lot of soul searching, to find out who I was. And Ulam was a huge part of that. Ulam was really this way for me to rediscover my own roots and my own personal attachment to my culture, not just because my parents grew up and were raised in and went to college in the Philippines and, were politically active in the Philippines, but because I now had a tie, and it was through food. So food really opened the door for me. And now it's so interesting because that's led to a whole other exploration of my identity. I started working in New York a few years ago while I was filming Ulam. And I ended up discovering this group of, I like to call the queer Asian community in New York City. And it was sort of centered around this event that would happen every few months called Bubble Tea. And it was the first time I sort of saw people that looked like me being successful, being free, being celebrated for who they were. And that changed me. That changed my perspective on myself. That helped me accept who I was. And that level of acceptance is invaluable. I think I wish I had known when I was 15 and in that small town that I would find that community later, and that I would live this very free and open life and be able to be a director and be able to be an artist, and that was possible for me. I think like the lack of sort of representation that we see in American media, specifically for Asian Americans, the fact that we don't see ourselves on screen is a huge problem. And I think it contributes to this idea that there is only one kind of success in America. And it is, primarily for the moneyed, I have to say, the moneyed Caucasian class. And so, we're seeing right now in America, I mean, I'm in Los Angeles. Just last week, Los Angeles was on fire. I mean, there is an uprising happening in the United States against police brutality and against what we see as, I think, a failure from the government to protect its citizens adequately. And so it's very interesting that my parents in another country protested a dictator. And now I am, it seems, sort of doomed to repeat that. And I think it's interesting. It's just it's a wild time to be alive.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, like LA was on fire with the Rodney King brutality case, right? And I just hope and pray that the second round of riots that happen here is not going to be instigated by those cops being let off. It's great outcome that the 3 other cops that were bystanders during that incident with George Floyd have now been charged, and the main culprit has had his charges upgraded to second-degree murder. But same token, it's not the end, right? If we do not see the judicial system actually result in a guilty verdict, I don't even know what's going to happen with the states at this juncture. And the protests that are going on right now will bring to light the injustices that have happened over the many decades and many hundreds of, the many centuries that have occurred in American history.
Yes. For me, I guess, when we get into topics like this that are so far reaching and like massive and kind of, colossal to kind of sit and think about, just sit with, For me, the question is always how I'm going to have these conversations with the people around me. And, you know, I mean, I think like probably being creatives and being storytellers yourselves, maybe this is, maybe it's you guys have a similar experience where I don't struggle to do that with my friends, but where it becomes really difficult is when I try and broach those topics with my family. And not to be like antagonistic, I never want to just like, you know, cause trouble or like agitate, but I do struggle with you know, knowing how to talk about those things with my parents, for example. You know, with like, I don't know, titos and titas that might have really strong views in chat, you know, things like that. I just wondered how, my first question, I have a few, but yeah, I wondered how you guys broach that, if you do, and how.
I think it's important. I like understand where the discomfort comes from, especially with approaching family. I think beyond that, there's probably like ingrained family dynamics or ways of coping with conflict within your family that has already been so like it's already a built structure, and approaching this finished structure of where you know where you stand, and being like, okay, I'm going to take like the bottom piece and everything is going to start like crumbling down.
Yeah.
It seems like a very daunting task, but I think acknowledging that as well is one of the first steps of unlearning, and then also passing that on, that other knowledge for other people to unlearn. In my own family, I feel like I am very much the fire starter, and have no qualms about throwing anything, but also maybe because I'm what I don't know. I feel like we're very feisty folks, and or at least for my mom and my dad, we are very vocal when we discuss things, and so I don't know, I think I've had my fair few fights of trying to, or publicly embarrassing family in restaurants or wherever, but I think it's important for you to sit in that discomfort, because it's like, you know, if we're not free, unless we're all free kind of thing. And I think it's important to remember that, and to really try and get it to these or to your parents or your extended family, because it's just all assimilation, and they're all just scared because of the effects of colonization that has clearly had on at least the Filipino experience.
Yeah,
I mean, islands are called Philippines after a white guy, so like, you know, it's
all roads lead back to
it's
colonialism.
Our identities is so colonized.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, Ali, for you, like, you know, with your parents being activists, like, is there more of a proactive kind of stance of talking about it in the house? Like, has it been a comfortable thing to navigate, or do you know, find that there are differences in your opinions generationally?
I mean, I think it's interesting. That's a great question. And I think it's interesting because my parents, like, I wouldn't be here without my parents, like all of us, you know? And I think that is something that I realize more and more each day, not just in my parents created me, but in the sense that they really laid the groundwork for me to be the person I am today and live with the freedoms that I have today. My father, as some of you know, is also a filmmaker. So this is a little bit of a family business. And he's been, you know, a producer for the last gosh, maybe 20 years or more. And he's been an executive at Columbia Pictures also for about 35 years.
Wow.
So this is a person who, in a very real way, has laid the groundwork for me to have a career in film. That said, you know, I've grown up my whole life seeing him hit that glass ceiling. You know, he's extremely accomplished and has been the sort of target of so much, I think, what we would call here systemic racism. You know, there is, like I said, very little representation, you know, in front of the camera for Asian Americans, and even less behind the camera, meaning the actual executives and filmmakers, writers, and directors. Many of them are not people of color, and many of them are not women. And so that is something that, you know, we fight with all the time. So it's interesting because I feel a lot like I'm picking up the baton, so to speak, picking up where my parents left off. And so I think our point of view is pretty similar, but I think I get to stand on the shoulders of giants, you know. I get to like continue on, and you know, if they were an activist now, it's my duty to also think critically about our government, think critically about what's happening in the Philippines right now with the anti-terror bill, to constantly educate myself so I understand you know, the perspective of my relatives that are still in the Philippines, and also the Filipino American community at home.
Yeah, powerful.
How did you find your dad navigate that acknowledgement that he's hit the glass ceiling? Or, you know, many have used that term, the bamboo ceiling, for us Asian Americans, Asian Australians, and so forth. Did he fight against the system, or did you feel like that Jen kind of accepted it as this is what it is? I've leveled, you know, my success is here. What more can I do about it?
I mean, I think it was painful, to be totally and brutally honest. It was extremely painful to watch other people less qualified that were white get promoted above him time and time again. And I'm obviously, you know, not pointing fingers, but I am going to say that this has not just been his experience. This has been an experience across the entertainment industry, and is and has been a huge problem that's come to light in the last few years. People are actually paying attention to the statistics and realizing that we are not hiring people of color. It doesn't matter how much we love the culture. If we're not putting our money where our mouth is as an industry, then it kind of doesn't matter. Because, you know, as much as like something that I think of all the time is like all of the romantic comedies we grew up with. I think about 90% of them, and don't quote me, go look it up on your own, but I think 90% of what I would consider mainstream romantic comedies have been directed by men. And these are considered women's movies, you know, which is interesting. So you basically have a dude defining what romantic love is over and over and over again. And I think that, that's not a bad perspective, but it's also not the only perspective. And so in the same way, you know, to have those new perspectives, you really need to hire those people. So to my father's credit, he hasn't actually stopped fighting. He is still producing movies today, and television shows. And I think seeing that resilience is something I've learned a lot from.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We can't go Sanj.
Oh no, I was just gonna maybe throw it to Ranima to ask whether, you know, how those things kind of work here back home. And for me, like, just to bring context, I work in the media, and, you know, have frequently realized that I'm the only brown person in the room. And I just wondered how you kind of how that like works for you in your life, and what you see within the POC community here in Melbourne, Ranima.
I'm very used to, in a professional sense, very used to being the only person of color.
Yeah. And I say that, and I'm not even that brown, so it's like I feel like you know what I mean? It's like
a shade of beige going on there.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not even sure if I can call that card, but it's a weird one. So yeah,
I feel like you're definitely not white, so there you go.
Yeah, we can say that.
So, and like it's your lived experience, not just necessarily the way you look, you know. You could be white passing, but you still experience, you know, different forms of racism.
Absolutely.
I think, I don't know. I think in my communities, I don't have many white friends anymore. That's kind of on purpose. I think it's to like protect myself. As I've, like in the past, I've been in, or it's been, I'm like trying to recall. It's just like I've been proven right. Like my gut feeling is always like, oh, this isn't right. And then I'm like, oh no, I'll give them a bit more of a chance. And then I'm like, oh no, I was right. I was right. I was uncomfortable for a reason, and I need to start listening to myself for that.
Yeah.
So in my like personal sense, in my social like community sense, I practice from experience, like to surround myself with like-minded people, or people with the similar lived experiences, or and like, or people like that understand and know when to listen, or know when or you know when they need to step out, or and like myself too, like when I need to sit down and listen, and when I need to you know, be there for someone else, or whatever it may be. I feel like in a, how to navigate that, like in the corporate world or the working world and all that sort of stuff, is a conversation that I continuously have here in Melbourne, be it in film, like on sets and stuff, on sets general, or the sets that I like, either if I direct, or if I'm a head of house or whatever, head of department, sorry. I try to, you know, talking to the producers or whatever, I'm like, okay, well, we can't, like, you know, let's give roles to people that need these jobs, or need this on their like portfolio or whatever, like, rather than giving it to the same white person again and again and again, you know. I'm a lot more on the like indie side of things, and that's where I try to implement that, is like starting with my own work, and then like my friends' work or whatever, my friends like other POC, or you know, starting there and then hoping that just grows, because we're trying to build our own community, our own film industry, or ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely found strength with the entrepreneurs. Like we have this running joke that every time we get invited somewhere, we up the diversity quotient because there's 6 of us, so there's like 6 brown women just turning up, like, you know, all at once. And there's a solidarity in that, because I think I don't know about you, Grace, but when we started going to like kind of more major food events, I definitely felt a little bit, had I not had 5 other Filipina women there, I would have probably felt pretty intimidated, you know, going into those spaces, because they're quite privileged spaces. So yeah, there's definitely strength in that, and it's really heartening to hear that, you know, locally those like grassroots creative communities are banding together, because I think we are seeing the effects of that very slowly, but you know, we're no longer we don't really have to feel shy about calling out the fact that in a lot of the Australian coverage of the BLM, you know, movement and protests currently going on, that a lot of it has been by white broadcasters, you know, news readers, news anchors, and it's hard to be okay with those optics, you know, no matter how good the standard of the news reading or the storytelling is. But yeah, I think I mean, rolling on with maybe that's a good segue into the next question, Grace, about how you've used your respective platforms and networks to find and, you know, lend support to others who need it right now.
I can speak a little bit to that. Recently, in the last week, like I'd mentioned, there have been protests going on every single day in LA in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement and demanding justice for George Floyd, who was brutally murdered by the police. And so that has been intense, meaning that for me personally, I was sort of looking for something to do. You know, like I said, my family has a history of activism that I'm very proud of. And so I really wanted to contribute, but I also wanted to allow space for the people that are the most oppressed to lead that movement. I think it's really, really important. It's something that we encountered when developing Ulam. When we were initially pitching it, there were a lot of comments saying, you know, first off, like, I don't understand Filipino food. I don't understand Filipino culture. I think the person that could help me most understand it is a white guy. And I was like, what? And I was like, why? And it was like, over and over again, you know, we were getting these suggestions to have a white host kind of explain the cuisine to sort of build that bridge. And it really, like, it really helped me to understand how systemic racism really affects everyone. Because this was coming even from other Filipinos, which was wild. And it also made me understand how important it is to have the people of that culture tell the story. And so for Ulam, you know, we specifically only interviewed the chefs and restaurant owners who were actually making the food. That was a choice. It was a choice to not have a Caucasian mainstream expert come in and have to validate Filipino cuisine. And you know, I think that was an important choice. And in the same way, now with the protests happening across the United States, we're really trying to center the Black experience and center Black people in that protest. So for my part, I've created an Instagram, which you can all take a look at. And if you have friends in the Los Angeles area, I've been posting every single confirmed protest that I can find every single day. And it's under Justice for George LA. And so just today, there were over 20 protests in the Los Angeles area, which is
amazing. Yeah. Well done.
Well done, Ellie. And I really love the point that you create the space for others to lead, the people that are most impacted by the cause. Because sometimes the saviorism, coming in as a white savior or the POC savior to actually help others in need, it ends up overwhelming us during this time that we feel so much pain. But we need to take the pause, actually step back and let them experience that and let them lead, as opposed to us trying to take it over, as we often do when we come into these spaces, right? So I think a really great point to bring that up, because, you know, being privileged overseas Filipinos, going back to the motherland at times and wanting to fix things within our family unit and beyond with people that our families are from, we often get looked at, oh, you're just the, you're just the Filipino that came back and think you can fix it all.
Mm.
What do you think we can do now as using the privilege of our, being here overseas right now with everything that's happening back in the motherland with the anti-terrorism bill? How can we be educated in that space and still make an impact and not have the excuse of you're just coming in trying to save us all? You have no idea what's really going on.
Mm.
That's a great question. And I think it's very, very difficult because we are the main thing that I feel like I'm running into is I, as a American-born Filipino person, as much as I look at this bill and, I'm not a legal expert, and I took a look at it, I read it, and I read a bunch of, the comments on how people are viewing it online, and it's troubling. It's troubling to me because of a few different reasons. I'm not sure how much you all have looked into the anti-terrorism bill that Duterte is currently pushing through. But it's very intense, and it is intense because terrorism is so broadly defined, which legally means that the bill may not be problematic in what it seems to be, but the bill is problematic for what it could mean. And that's always how legal language is, if things are defined broadly. For example, terrorism is defined in the bill as anything interfering with critical infrastructure. And now critical infrastructure is defined in the bill as including telecommunications, which really means telecommunications and all internet communications. So if you are interfering with that, if you are using that to quote unquote try to spread fear, you could be cited for terrorism. And that goes down to if you send a tweet that is critical of the government, say, we believe the president is not protecting people enough from coronavirus, say, and that this action is killing people. That is a theoretical tweet that somebody could sort of put out into the world. That tweet could be seen as inciting fear and interfering with critical infrastructure. That's just one example. And then on top of that, not to kind of go into this too much, but I was reading up on it just for the last few days. Terrorism is also treated in this bill almost as a contagious thing, meaning, say you tweet that criticism of the government, then someone else reads that tweet and retweets it. That person could be tried in, the Philippines as not just an accessory to terrorism, but a terrorist themselves. So terrorism is not just something one person does, but it can spread to their family, to their friends, to their workplace, to their organization. And the only people that really have the power to determine who a terrorist is and what terrorist action is a committee called the ATC. So this is the Anti-Terrorism Committee or Commission, and it's a group of 9 people. I believe that they are not all elected officials, and these 9 people really have the final say on who a terrorist is. So it's very troubling for a lot of these reasons.
I'm curious, Ranima, if you are in touch with any creatives in Manila based in the Philippines, and whether what those conversations, whether you've been having any with people over there.
I actually don't know personally a lot of creatives in Manila. I would be so into meeting more creatives in Manila and being in touch with those people, because sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, let's do a trip
Yeah.
when this is all over.
Yeah.
I know.
I'm ready.
Would be into it.
Yeah.
And I'm like incredibly, or would love to know if what is happening and what's the experience firsthand from locals or people that are there and living through what seems like will be another regime.
Yeah. I think we've got very short memories, don't we? I don't know. It's just hard to comprehend that the generation of our titos, titas, they lived through what the regimes were. But then you oftentimes, kind of hear them still being okay about what's happening now again. So it just sort of begs the question about, whilst we are resilient peoples, we don't deserve this to be happening again to the next generation. It's really us having the privilege that we have here to try to, put a mirror on that discourse of what's going on and trying to do it in the most safe way, in the most educated way, because oftentimes we can start going down the bandwagon of us versus them. But just wanting to, I guess, just reiterate that engagement is necessary and discourse in our opinions is necessary. And discourse and activism is not terrorism. Those two. And you can't just bring down a whole network as an example, as a news service, not even an alternative news service. It's not the equivalent of a Fox News in the US. ABS-CBN, that's what we grew up over here in being overseas Filipinos. The fact that network no longer can broadcast, it's a travesty, and it makes you feel so, I don't know, like, what do we do next? Like, how is that possible that a broadcast network like that is no longer on the air to talk about the other news or the different disparity and diversity of the news?
I agree, and I think it's an incredible violation of free speech. I think that's really what it is. But again, this is coming from an American, asterisk, this is coming from an American who isn't currently living in the Philippines. And I have a lot of family there, and we have a lot of very, I would say, fiery discussions. But I think the ability to have those discussions with your family members is the most important thing. And that is really what I would encourage anybody who's watching this to do is read the bill for yourself. Educate yourself and talk to your family about it. I think that being engaged politically is no longer a choice. I think that like we had said earlier in a prep call, our lives are political. Our existence is political. And I think that the sooner we acknowledge that, the sooner we can create real change.
Agree. The fact that we exist as the entrepreneurs, being a collective of 6 women, that's a political statement. Turning up into those spaces that otherwise didn't necessarily welcome or create that space to feel comfortable in, I think that's an achievement in itself. And this discussion is a political one. And so it kind of irked me when you said, being on the internet and spreading messages about discourse about the bill, that could be seen as an act of terrorism, but I don't know, like
so be it, we're terrorists now.
I know.
That's it. I just embrace it. Freaking come at me.
Sandra was sending me tips and hints of how to get a burner email, and she's like, oh no, I've already signed that petition. I've already donated my information.
They have my details. Yeah.
Prior sort of campaigns, right? But, I think, these conversations is why we come together. I think it's oftentimes, it starts off as food being the gateway to the more deeper conversations of why we've brought coffee and CHIKAHAN together. And I think, it's a recognition also that the conversation needs to continue. It doesn't stop at one episode, but hopefully it lights a fire like what Ranima had mentioned, that you become the fire starter in whatever networks you surround yourself. Comfortable about that, because, if we don't, then guess what? We all come to, we just agree to disagree and to move about
our side with the oppressor if we don't.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. Filipinos have done enough of that.
Yeah.
I know. It's kind of ironic that we're celebrating a long weekend to celebrate Queen's birthday, right?
I didn't even know it was a long weekend.
Yeah, I
That's
actually
good.
forgot.
There you go. Good on
I
you.
forgot.
So this was such a rich conversation. We're getting to the end of the call with 5 minutes still to spare. But I guess, just I know obviously we've had some heavy issues that we've navigated in, but maybe close it out with something that, one unforgettable food moment or experience in your life that you'd like to share that is continuing to sort of drive your passions in your respective spaces.
Ranima, you go.
This one, not a lot of food was involved, but I was in just outside of Legazpi with my. This was very recent. This was last year in April, and we were celebrating my yaya's 60th birthday or 59th birthday.
Wow.
And it was just myself and my partner, herself, and this couple and her 96-year-old Lola kind of thing, or mother, I should say, but we called her Lola. And we were sitting by the beach eating pulutan so we just had guayabano, and we had pili nuts. I forgot the name of the nuts. Maybe they are pili nuts.
Pili nuts, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And we were just eating those, drinking beer, and we were or my yaya or Ayaglo was we spoke about death, and there was something about sitting by the beach with the wind in your hair, drinking San Miguel's and eating guayabano and pili nuts that it was just a really, really, I don't know, through what she spoke about, I felt like I really connected with my history and my culture and my people, and just understanding that essentially she said, when I die, I want to die quick. And that was really, the reasons why she goes into it is she doesn't want her family to pay for her if she's going to be sick for a long time. She doesn't want to be a burden, essentially. And to have this really adamant, I want to pass quickly for the benefit of my family, and so that I don't become a negative on my family and they just miss me immediately, kind of thing. And I think that speaks so many words about the way it's structured in the Philippines, is everyone does stuff for their family. They don't do it for themselves. It's not a very single-minded community or culture. Everything that is a choice by our people is for the benefit of others. It's not just for us. And I think that was that's still one of, though a very recent one, a very, very important food memory, though it wasn't a lot of food, just food memory in the Philippines.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I felt that.
I love that you still have that beautiful tie with your yaya.
Yeah.
That's a testament to, they might not be related by blood, and they might not have been, positioned themselves to be a yaya by choice, but the fact that you have that ingrained love for that person that resonates now as an adult, it's so beautiful. So thanks for sharing that one.
Thank you.
I love that image of eating pili nuts on the beach, talking about death. So epic.
Yeah.
I was also Dad, this is a night, happy birthday.
No, I mean, I felt that too. I think that Filipinos are inherently generous. I think that of all of the, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but of all of the people I've met in my life, I feel like Filipinos would just give you the shirt off their back. You know, they would just give you shelter if you needed it. I think that I've seen that in all my experiences traveling to the Philippines. Everyone will sacrifice for another. And even a stranger, not just a family. And I think that that is amazing. And even in the diaspora, I mean, not to throw it back, but kind of to throw it back, I still remember my food memory was when all of us were in that kitchen when we did our screening of Ulam, and we had that big Kamayan feast. And at the end of it all, and at the end of that huge event that went so well and was sold out, and it was so wonderful, everybody was just sitting in the kitchen eating the leftovers. And that was it for me. That was the moment it felt like, oh, this is family. This is what family means when all the pretenses are off and everybody's just passing around a bottle, and you know we're just eating the food directly out of the pot, and you know and passing skewers to each other. That was the moment where I was like, you know, there is something about Filipinos around the world. We are so connected. And we are so giving. And I think that is the reason why time and time again, like, I am so proud to be Filipino. And I mean that, you know, in America, I'm proud to make movies about Filipino culture. I'm proud to write about being Filipino. As Grace mentioned, I have a book later this year coming out with my friend Alvin Kailan, who is a celebrity chef here in the States. And it's called Amboy, Recipes from the Filipino American Dream. Because that's what it's about. You know, it's about us being proud to represent our culture, you know, wherever we may be around the world. And I think that that's important to acknowledge, especially when we hear criticism from family members sometimes, from family back home. I think our hearts are in the right place. You know, we're trying to represent our culture positively, and I hope that people remember that.
That's beautiful. And it's a great way to end this conversation on the fact that our relationship started over food, it continues with food, and we will continue to be reunited over food. So on behalf of the entrepreneurs, me and Sandra, you know, thank you both for your generosity of time and spirit. And we hope that in the world, you stay safe, you stay healthy, and you stay very hopeful, because we're in it together. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
You guys, thank you again.
Yeah. Thank
Bye.
you.